February 17, 1943. North Atlantic, 380 miles southwest of Iceland. The water is black and cold, churning under a sky the color of wet slate. U-boat commander Heinrich Lehmann-Willenbrock stands in the conning tower of U-96, salt spray freezing on his beard, eyes scanning the horizon through Zeiss binoculars that cost more than a German factory worker earns in 6 months. The wind carries the smell of diesel and brine. In his hand, folded inside his oilskin jacket, rests a decoded message transmitted just 4 hours earlier from Befehlshaber der U-boot headquarters in Paris. The message is precise, clinical, impossibly confident. Grid reference B5321, convoy HX224, 14 merchant vessels, light escort, attack at dawn. Lehmann-Willenbrock has received hundreds of such messages. He has never questioned their security. The Enigma machine sitting below deck in the radio room, its rotors clicking like insect legs, is a mathematical fortress. 3 rotors selected from a set of 8, each with 26 positions, each rotation creating a new electrical pathway through a plugboard with 10 crossed cables. The German naval staff has calculated the possibilities. 158 million potential settings. Even if the British captured a machine intact, even if they photographed every rotor and sketched every wire, they would still need to test every possible daily key configuration. At 1 setting per second, it would take 2,000 years. The mathematics are unassailable. The system is perfect. Lehmann-Willenbrock never considers that the enemy might already know his position, his orders, his attack time. He never imagines that his confidence itself is the trap. But 4,000 miles to the west, in a compound of wooden huts surrounded by barbed wire outside Washington, D.C., a woman named Agnes Mayer Driscoll has been reading German naval traffic for 9 months. She does not carry a gun. She has never seen combat. But on a low table in front of her, marked with grease pencil on translucent paper, lies the decoded text of Lehmann-Willenbrock's attack order, transcribed 68 minutes after it was transmitted from Paris. The message is not a mystery, it is not a puzzle, it is simply text, German words rendered into English with bureaucratic efficiency. Grid B5321, convoy HX224, 14 vessels. Attack at dawn. Agnes does not know the name of the U-boat commander who will read this message. She does not need to. By the time she finishes her coffee, the decoded intelligence will be on a teletype to the Admiralty in London, and from London to the convoy escort commander aboard HMS Vanessa, and from Vanessa to the destroyers that will alter course at 400 hours to put themselves between the convoy and grid square B5321, precisely where U-96 will surface, expecting an undefended target. This is not fortune. This is not luck. This is industrialized knowledge, the transformation of enemy confidence into Allied advantage, and it is happening in real time, every hour, every day, across every theater of the war. The story of Enigma begins not with machines but with pride. In the aftermath of the First World War, the German military is shattered, humiliated, restricted by the Versailles Treaty to an army of 100,000 men, forbidden submarines, forbidden aircraft, forbidden any instrument of modern warfare. But there is one weapon the treaty does not mention: information. In 1926, the German Navy begins purchasing commercial encryption machines manufactured by Chiffriermaschinen AG, a Berlin company selling devices to banks and corporations. The machine, called Enigma, is elegant in its simplicity. Type a letter on the keyboard, watch a different letter illuminate on the lampboard. The electrical pathway changes with every keystroke, scrambling plaintext into gibberish. To an intercepted radio listener, German naval communications sound like random noise. To a recipient with an Enigma machine configured to identical daily settings, the noise resolves instantly into clear orders. By 1930, the German military has modified the commercial design. They add a plug board, swap rotors, increase key complexity. The modified machine enters production. Within 3 years, every German warship, every U-boat, every Wehrmacht divisional headquarters is equipped with an Enigma variant. The system becomes the central nervous system of German military coordination. Kriegsmarine commanders issue attack orders over open radio frequencies, confident that even if the British intercept every transmission, the content remains mathematically inaccessible. This confidence is not baseless. German cryptographic experts have studied the machine exhaustively. The number of potential daily key settings exceeds the number of stars visible from Earth. No human team, no matter how large, can brute force the solution. The machine is perfect. That belief becomes doctrine. Doctrine becomes arrogance. And arrogance becomes vulnerability. What the Germans fail to anticipate is the possibility of systematic industrial attack, not the work of a single genius but the coordinated effort of thousands of minds, armed with resources no European nation can imagine. The Third Reich believes in its machines. It believes in its mathematics. What it does not believe is that the United States of America, that nation of cowboys and Hollywood, that country whose citizens eat too much and work too little, might bring to bear resources so vast, so extravagant, so absurdly excessive that the very concept of unbreakable becomes meaningless. The breaking begins in England, in a Victorian mansion called Bletchley Park, 50 miles north of London. In 1939, the British Government Code and Cipher School moves into the estate and begins recruiting mathematicians, linguists, chess champions, anyone whose mind operates in patterns. Among them is a pale, awkward Cambridge mathematician named Alan Turing, whose paper on computable numbers has earned him a small, strange fame among theoretical logicians, but no recognition whatsoever in the practical world. Turing is given a problem. The German Navy has changed its Enigma rotors. Intercept stations are capturing thousands of encrypted messages daily, but everyone is unreadable. The Admiralty is desperate. U-boats are sinking merchant ships faster than Britain can replace them. If the convoy routes remain exposed, if the wolf packs continue operating with impunity, Britain will starve. Turing does not try to solve Enigma by hand. Instead, he designs a machine to fight a machine. He calls it the bomb, an electromechanical computer 6 feet tall, weighing a ton, filled with rotating drums that simulate Enigma rotors at high speed. The concept is simple in theory. Test thousands of possible rotor settings per hour, discard impossible combinations, narrow the search until a probable daily key emerges. In practice, the engineering is monstrous. The first bomb, installed at Bletchley Park in March 1940, is temperamental, prone to breakdowns, limited in power. It can check rotor configurations faster than any human team, but not fast enough. The Germans change keys daily. Every morning at midnight the Enigma settings shift, and the previous day's solution becomes worthless. Bletchley Park needs to break the daily key within hours, not days. They need more machines, more power, more resources. The British can build 10 bombs, 20 at most. They do not have the industrial base to manufacture hundreds. They do not have the raw materials. They do not have the electrical generating capacity. They need help. And in 1942, after Pearl Harbor, after the United States enters the war, help arrives with a scale the British cannot fathom. The Americans approach the problem the way they approach everything, with extravagant abundance. In early 1942, U.S. Navy cryptanalysts establish a signals intelligence headquarters at 3801 Nebraska Avenue in Washington, a compound of hastily constructed wood frame buildings designated OP-20G. The Office of Naval Intelligence assigns 700 personnel to the site by summer, 1,200 by winter, 3,000 by the following spring. This is not a select team of geniuses working in isolation. This is an industrial operation. Linguists, mathematicians, radio engineers, IBM machinists, librarians, schoolteachers, anyone who can recognize patterns, anyone who can endure repetitive analytic labor is recruited. Agnes Mayer Driscoll, a former math teacher from Illinois, becomes one of the lead cryptanalysts. She is 47 years old, unmarried, plain-spoken, relentless. Her colleagues call her Madame X. She does not work in intuitive leaps. She works in meticulous accumulation, cataloging German radio procedure, identifying operator habits, building statistical profiles of message structures. The Americans do not merely copy British methods. They exceed them. Where Bletchley Park builds 20 bombs, the U.S. Navy contracts with National Cash Register Corporation in Dayton, Ohio, to build 120. NCR retasks an entire manufacturing complex to produce rotors, wiring harnesses, relay switches, electromagnetic drums. Engineers work 16-hour shifts. The first American-built bomb is delivered in September 1942. By January 1943, 15 machines are operational. By June, 50. By the war's end, the U.S. Navy operates more code-breaking machines than Germany has Enigma devices in the entire Atlantic Fleet. But machines alone are not enough. The Americans add something the British lack: raw computing power driven by a culture of brute force problem-solving. IBM contracts with the Navy to supply tabulating machines, punch-card computers originally designed for census data. Operators feed captured German messages into the tabulators as punched cards, 60 columns per card, thousands of cards per day. The machines sort and cross-reference, searching for patterns invisible to human eyes. If a German radio operator transmits the same phrase at the start of every message, a weather report, a ritual greeting, the tabulators detect the repetition. If a U-boat commander ends every transmission with "Heil Hitler," the tabulators flag the redundancy. These are not penetrations through genius. These are penetrations through repetition, through the willingness to test every hypothesis, to catalog every anomaly, to process data at a volume no human team could endure. The Germans are meticulous. They are disciplined, but they are not industrially redundant. Every day, a Kriegsmarine radio operator selects his Enigma rotors according to a printed codebook, sets his plugboard cables, types his message. He believes the system is unbreakable. He never considers that his own procedural habits, his tendency to start messages with standard phrases, his preference for certain abbreviations, are leaving fingerprints in the cipher. He never imagines that across the ocean, punch-card machines are cataloging those fingerprints, and that once cataloged, they become predictable, and once predictable, they become breakable. By mid-1943, American codebreakers are reading German naval traffic with mechanical regularity. Not every message, not instantly, but enough and fast enough to alter the war at sea. When a U-boat pack receives orders to assemble at a specific grid coordinate, OP-20G decodes the order within hours. The intelligence is transmitted to the Atlantic Convoy Routing Office in London. Convoys alter course to avoid the ambush. U-boat commanders arrive at the designated intercept point and find empty ocean. They assume the convoy changed routes by chance. They do not suspect that the enemy is reading their mail. The psychological effect is devastating in a way no single battle could achieve. The U-boat war depends on coordination, on wolf pack tactics that concentrate submarines against isolated convoys. When the coordination fails, when the convoys vanish from predicted intercept points, the entire strategy collapses. Admiral Karl Dönitz, commander of the Kriegsmarine U-boat fleet, reviews loss statistics in the summer of 1943 and sees a pattern he cannot explain. U-boats are being sunk at unprecedented rates, 41 submarines lost in May alone. Convoys are evading intercepts with improbable frequency. Dönitz orders an investigation. German cryptographic experts examine the Enigma system and report that it remains secure. The mathematics are sound. The rotors are unchanged. The keys are rotated daily. There is no structural vulnerability. The conclusion, documented in Kriegsmarine internal memos, is that the British must have developed advanced radar and direction-finding equipment. The possibility that the Americans are breaking Enigma in real time is never seriously considered. It is mathematically implausible, and so the German Navy continues transmitting orders over radio, confident in its security, unaware that every transmission is a gift to the enemy. This is the central irony of the Enigma collapse. The Germans do not lose because their system is weak. They lose because their confidence in the system prevents them from imagining its defeat. German engineers test Enigma security by asking whether a captured machine could be reverse-engineered. The answer is no. But they never ask whether an enemy with unlimited resources might build an entirely new kind of machine to attack the problem, not through understanding Enigma's design, but through exhaustive trial and error at industrial scale. The question is unthinkable. It violates German assumptions about how war is fought, and so it is never asked. The Americans, by contrast, assume nothing is unthinkable. In the summer of 1943, the Navy expands Op-20G to include a new building at Nebraska Avenue, a structure so large it requires its own electrical substation. IBM installs a roomful of tabulating machines, their card sorters clattering 24 hours a day, processing intercepts faster than German radio operators can transmit them. The noise is deafening, mechanical, rhythmic, hypnotic. Personnel work in 8-hour shifts, sleep in barracks on the compound, return to work without ever leaving the perimeter. The entire operation is classified under a security designation, so strict that even the wives of Navy officers stationed at Op-20G do not know what their husbands do each day. Rumors circulate. Some say it is a weather station. Some say it is a training facility. No one says it is the place where the German Navy is being read like a morning newspaper. Agnes Mayer-Driscoll works at a table near the bomb machines, a position that vibrates faintly from the electromagnetic relays. She does not think in grand strategic terms. She thinks in rotor positions, in plugboard permutations, in the subtle shifts of frequency distribution across intercepted messages. When a bomb machine produces a candidate daily key, Agnes tests it by hand, decrypting sample messages to confirm coherence. Most candidates fail, but when one succeeds, when a random string of letters resolves into German syntax, the sensation is not triumph but confirmation. The method works, the machine works, the work continues. There is no single moment of breakthrough, no dramatic revelation. Enigma is not broken once and forever. It is broken daily, mechanically, through a process that resembles factory production more than intellectual discovery. Every morning, intercept stations in Maryland, Hawaii, and Scotland forward captured German transmissions to Op-20G every morning. Tabulators process the intercepts. Bombs test rotor configurations. Analysts verify solutions. By afternoon, the daily key is solved. By evening, German naval orders are decoded and forwarded to operational commanders. The system is not perfect. Some days, the key remains unsolved until late evening. Some messages, encrypted with non-standard procedures, resist decryption entirely. But the overall success rate is astonishing. By late 1943, American cryptanalysts are reading more than 80% of German naval traffic within 12 hours of transmission. The Kriegsmarine, unaware, continues broadcasting its plans in real time. The symbolic object of this transformation is not a weapon. It is a punch card, an innocuous rectangle of stiff paper, 3 inches by 7, perforated with rectangular holes. The cards are manufactured by the millions, stacked in boxes, fed into IBM tabulators that read them at a rate of 400 cards per minute. Each card represents a fragment of intercepted cipher. Each hole represents a letter or a rotor position or a statistical marker. The cards are not intelligent. They do not think. They simply accumulate, sort, and compare. But in their accumulation, they represent something the Germans cannot replicate: the willingness to treat information as raw material, to process it at volume, to overwhelm complexity not through elegance but through sheer excess. The punch cards are quintessentially American. They are industrial, disposable, designed for mass production. They are not beautiful. There is no craftsmanship in a punch card, no artistry, but there is power in their abundance. The Germans have brilliant engineers. They have disciplined radio operators. They have machines that work flawlessly. What they do not have is a culture that can imagine solving a problem by building 10,000 punch card sorters and feeding them intercepted radio traffic until patterns emerge. The concept is almost offensive. It is brute force elevated to doctrine. It is the antithesis of German engineering philosophy, which prizes precision over volume, elegance over redundancy. And that philosophical difference, more than any technological gap, determines the outcome. By the spring of 1944, the implications of Allied codebreaking extend far beyond the Battle of the Atlantic. Enigma decrypts inform the D-Day invasion planning, revealing German troop dispositions across Normandy. In the Pacific, American cryptanalysts break Japanese naval codes, enabling the ambush of Admiral Yamamoto's aircraft and the decisive victory at Midway. The decrypts do not win battles by themselves. Soldiers still fight, ships still sink, men still die, but the decrypts alter the calculus of risk, shifting probability in favor of the Allies, making the previously uncertain incrementally more predictable. The German soldiers and sailors experiencing the consequences do not understand what has changed. U-boat commanders continue receiving orders via Enigma, continue following those orders, and continue dying at rates that defy strategic explanation. In the autumn of 1944, Lieutenant Friedrich Steinhoff, commander of U-511, surfaces his submarine in the mid-Atlantic to recharge batteries, and receives an encrypted message directing him to rendezvous with a supply tanker at grid coordinates AJ 6832. Steinhoff follows the orders precisely. He arrives at the grid square on schedule, and 12 minutes later, depth charges from an American destroyer shatter his hull, sending U-511 to the bottom with all hands. The destroyer arrived 3 hours before the rendezvous time, positioned itself along the expected approach route, and waited. Steinhoff, dying in black water, never knows why the Americans were there. His final transmission, a distress call encrypted with the Enigma machine sinking beside him, is intercepted by a listening station in Maryland and decoded within 90 minutes. The text is fragmentary, desperate. Under attack. Position AJ 6834. Request immediate assistance. The decoded message is filed with thousands of others. No assistance is sent. No German commander questions whether the enemy might be reading the transmissions. The British, by late 1944, begin to understand the scope of American cryptographic capabilities, and the understanding breeds a quiet unease. Bletchley Park, the birthplace of Enigma breaking, still operates, still produces decrypts, but the industrial scale of OP-20G dwarfs anything the British can field. American code-breaking is not a boutique operation run by eccentric Cambridge mathematicians. It is a factory. It processes intelligence with the same efficiency General Motors processes steel. British liaison officers visiting OP-20G in the summer of 1944 are staggered by the scale. Rows of bombs, rows of tabulators, rows of young women, WASPs, stenographers, college graduates, sitting at desks processing intercepts with assembly line efficiency. One British officer writes in his diary, "They have turned cryptanalysis into mass production. It is impressive. It is also rather frightening." The fear is not unfounded. The Americans are demonstrating that information, when treated as an industrial resource, can be harvested at scale, processed at speed, and weaponized with terrifying efficiency. The implications extend beyond the war. If code breaking can be industrialized, what else can? Surveillance, intelligence gathering, political monitoring. The British, who have spent centuries cultivating a culture of genteel espionage, of subtle persuasion, human intelligence, careful maneuvering, are watching the Americans pioneer something fundamentally different. The Americans are not interested in subtlety. They are interested in totality, and they have the resources to pursue it. The end comes not with a dramatic revelation but with exhaustion. By early 1945, the Kriegsmarine is collapsing. U-boat production cannot replace losses. Fuel shortages restrict operations. The wolf packs are scattered, isolated, hunted. The few commanders still at sea transmit increasingly frantic messages, pleading for reinforcements, for supplies, for strategic guidance. American cryptanalysts continue decoding the messages, but by this stage, the decrypts reveal little of operational value. The German Navy is no longer coordinating attacks. It is simply dying. The Enigma messages become elegies, final transmissions from sinking submarines, last reports from scuttled ships, desperate signals from commanders who know the war is lost. On April 30, 1945, Adolf Hitler commits suicide in his Berlin bunker. On May 7, the Wehrmacht surrenders unconditionally. The war in Europe ends. And in a series of warehouses and converted mansions across Britain and the United States, cryptanalysts shut down bombs, dismantle tabulators, incinerate punch cards. The machines are destroyed. The personnel are dispersed. The operation is classified at a level so extreme that even the existence of Enigma breaking will remain secret for another 30 years. The men and women who broke the codes return to civilian life, forbidden to speak of their work, unable to explain to spouses or children what they did during the war. Agnes Mayer Driscoll retires from the Navy in 1949, settles in a modest house in Arlington, and lives quietly until her death in 1971. Her obituary lists her as a retired civil servant. It does not mention Enigma. It does not mention Op 20. It does not mention that she was one of the most effective intelligence operatives of the 20th century. The Germans, in the aftermath, conduct their own investigations. As Allied occupation forces seize Kriegsmarine files, as captured documents are translated and analyzed, German officers begin piecing together the extent of the disaster. In 1946, Admiral Dönitz, imprisoned and awaiting trial at Nuremberg, is shown decrypted transcripts of his own orders, messages he transmitted in 1943 and 1944, now rendered in English with meticulous accuracy. Dönitz reads them in silence. When asked whether he suspected Allied code-breaking during the war, he responds simply, "It was considered mathematically impossible." That phrase, mathematically impossible, becomes the epitaph for German naval intelligence. The mathematics were sound. The logic was flawless. But the assumption that the enemy could not brute force the system through industrial excess proved catastrophically wrong. German engineers, interrogated by American cryptanalysts after the war, are shown the bombs, the tabulators, the industrial-scale code-breaking apparatus. They are stunned not by the cleverness of the Allied approach but by its crudeness. One German cryptographic expert, reviewing the American methods, remarks, "You did not break Enigma. You simply built a bigger machine." The American officer conducting the interrogation smiles and says, "Yes." There is no shame in the admission. The Americans did not outwit the Germans. They out-resourced them. And in total war, resources matter more than elegance. The story of Enigma is often told as a story of genius, of Alan Turing's brilliance, of Polish mathematicians who pioneered early Enigma attacks, of eccentric codebreakers working in secrecy. Those stories are true, but they are incomplete. Enigma was not defeated by genius alone. It was defeated by a system, by the willingness of the United States to apply resources at a scale that made genius almost irrelevant. The Americans did not need to understand Enigma perfectly. They simply needed to test enough configurations, process enough intercepts, build enough machines. Quality was replaced by quantity. Elegance was replaced by persistence. And the German assumption that such an approach was impossible became the very reason it succeeded. The punch cards, stacked in boxes and fed into tabulators, were never celebrated. No monuments were built to honor them. But they represent a distinctly American approach to war. The belief that any problem, no matter how complex, can be solved through sheer accumulation of effort. The Germans built a perfect machine and assumed perfection was sufficient. The Americans built 10,000 imperfect machines and assumed volume would compensate. Both sides were correct within their assumptions, but only one assumption matched the reality of 20th century industrial warfare. In the years after the war, this disbelief is instructive. It reveals the depth of German confidence in technological superiority, a confidence so profound that even documentary evidence cannot dislodge it. The Third Reich was built on the mythology of Germanic engineering brilliance, of precision, of systems designed to perfection. Enigma was the embodiment of that mythology. To admit that it failed, that it was rendered irrelevant not through superior German machines being built by the enemy, but through the enemy building vastly more inferior machines, is to admit that the mythology itself was hollow. And so the admission never fully comes. The war ends. The machines are destroyed. The truth is classified. And the German confidence in Enigma, though proven catastrophically wrong, persists in collective memory as a kind of ghost, an echo of what was believed, even after belief became demonstrably fatal. The American cryptanalysts, by contrast, have no illusions. They do not celebrate their brilliance. They do not claim to have outwitted the enemy through superior intellect. When asked years later how they broke Enigma, they describe it in mechanical terms. Rotors tested, punch cards processed, statistical patterns identified. There is no poetry in the description. There is only process. And perhaps that is the point. The Americans did not need to understand the enemy better. They simply needed to process information faster, at greater volume, with fewer assumptions about what was possible. The culture of American abundance, of excess production, of redundancy, of brute force pragmatism, was applied to intelligence work, and it succeeded not because it was elegant but because it was overwhelming. This is the legacy of Enigma, not the breaking of a code, but the demonstration that even the most sophisticated system can be overwhelmed by sufficient resources. The Germans trusted in mathematics. The Americans trusted in machinery. And when the two philosophies collided, machinery won, not because it was smarter, but because it could operate longer, faster, and at greater scale than any human-designed system could anticipate. The final Enigma transmission decoded by American cryptanalysts is sent on May 6, 1945, one day before Germany's surrender. It is a brief message from a coastal artillery battery in northern Germany, reporting that ammunition is exhausted, positions are overrun, and the unit is preparing to destroy its equipment and surrender to British forces. The message is encrypted with the standard daily Enigma key. It is intercepted by a listening station in Maryland at 1843 hours GMT. It is decoded by 2015 hours. By the time the decrypt reaches operational commanders, the war is effectively over. The information is meaningless. The unit has already surrendered. The transmission is filed, cataloged, and forgotten. But there is something fitting about that final message. Its futility, its obsolescence, its encryption that protected nothing. For 4 years, the Germans transmitted their orders, their fears, their strategies over radio, believing them secure. And for 4 years, the Americans read those transmissions, not because they were cleverer, but because they refused to accept that anything was unbreakable. The Germans believed in the perfection of their machines. The Americans believed in the imperfection of all machines and built their strategy around compensating for it. One belief sustained morale. The other won the war. Today, the punch cards are gone. The bombs are dismantled. Op 20G is a parking lot. The men and women who staff the code-breaking stations are dead or dying, their stories mostly untold, their contributions obscured by decades of classification. But the principle they demonstrated remains. That information, when treated as an industrial commodity, becomes a weapon more decisive than bombs or bullets. The Germans never imagined that the enemy might read their orders in real time. It was not a failure of imagination. It was a failure to understand that the enemy did not need to imagine. They simply needed to build and build and build until the impossible became routine. The recurring sound, if there is one, is not the click of Enigma rotors but the mechanical chatter of punch card tabulators, rhythmic, relentless, impersonal. It is the sound of abundance applied to information, of machines processing data faster than humans can think, of industrial power overwhelming mathematical elegance. It is the sound of a new kind of warfare, one the Germans, for all their discipline and precision, were never equipped to fight. And in that sound, distant now and fading into history, is a truth about the nature of modern conflict. That victory does not always belong to the most sophisticated or the most brilliant. Sometimes,